lot of us have participated in other webinars and other informational sessions and just read things through the media, but they are really, really taking a strong focus on an earn and learn strategy, and that is part of what we want to talk about today. I think you can see that it's been building up over time. When you look at our current initiative, the ADAM, which is was funded through the Workforce Innovation Fund grants and is a strict focus on manufacturing. Then we have the NEG Dislocated Worker Training Project that many of you are working on. And then third, what we've currently got going on, and some of you also participated in, is our Rapid Response Innovation Grants. And those we've all based on sectors as we've been doing in the past. The NEG DWT is definitely a work-based learning grant. I know that there's been a requirement for you to meet 25%, and Jill in a few minutes is going to talk more about how that grant is, what the similarities and the differences are between that grant and this NEG that we're currently going to apply for. And then since the President's charge around the job-driven training strategies, they've come out with 3 additional funding opportunities. One, the TACT, which I know I have second, but I am going to change it up a little bit and talk about it first because that's been ongoing. But as many of you may be aware, it's different this year in that it has a strong component for apprenticeship programs, and it also removed the focus for trade customers. And that is the $500 million that they've got going. The other one that we're working on application for is the Ready to Work proposal. And that is similar to the ADAM in that it is a specific targeted model. It's funded with H-1B money, and it's focusing on long-term unemployed workers, again, the work-based training, such as earn and learn models like OJT, paid work experience, etc. And then now today we want to talk about the job-driven NEG. I'm going to turn it over to Jill right now so that she can walk you through some of the differences that we're going to see in the job-driven NEG and what you're currently, those of you that are doing the DWT NEG are doing. So Jill?
Okay, this is Jill. I will go ahead and proceed. I'm hoping you can hear me. Anyway, hello everyone. What I want to do just to take a minute here is to talk about the differences between the 2 of these projects. We're halfway through the DWT NEG, and nearly half of the LWEs are operating that program. For those of you who aren't, it will still be helpful, I think, for you to hear this discussion because it'll emphasize some of the things that we're looking for, that DOL is looking for in this job-driven NEG. In a moment, a little bit later, we're going to go through the survey that we're asking you to fill out, the LWEs fill out your interest survey, so we can get an idea of what your thinking is as far as this particular initiative. But for now, talking about the DWT and comparing that to the job-driven, I just wanted to point out some of the major differences is that with this particular grant, there is an emphasis on serving the long-term unemployed, the UI profiled, which is the same as it is with the DWT. This one goes further to add another category that you'll see there in the chart, the foreign-trained immigrant workers who qualify as dislocated workers and have faced barriers to obtaining employment in their trained field or profession. So that's another category. And then I've made a notation there that you can serve other dislocated workers. The emphasis is on these groups that are listed, those 3 specific groups. So what we do need to make sure that we do with this project is, as we've done with the dislocated worker, is that you do need to hit hard the long-term unemployed, the UI profiled. Those are the categories most likely that we're going to be using. Hit that hard, work your partnerships as far as if it's with IDES or whoever your partners are, because DOL will be looking to see how we're doing with serving those target groups, and of course they're going to want to see your efforts in reaching out to that group. I think areas have done an excellent job with the DWT in working the relationship with IDS and making phone calls to people on that list, working the UI profiled list. So anyway, I just wanted to point out the main difference there is that there's an additional category, the foreign trained immigrant workers. The expenditures, you'll see there that the work-based learning component is a little bit more than it is under the dislocated worker. You have to have at least 35% of your expenditures, your total expenditures, need to be work-based learning. And work-based learning are activities like OJT, customized training, apprenticeships, paid work experience, and internships, where there's that direct connection with an employer. It's an earn while you learn type of thing. And what DOL is encouraging us to do, and what of course we're encouraging you to do, is to go beyond the 35% as you're designing your program. And that could be because you have extensive OJTs that you're using. It could be that you're using customized training. But give that some serious thought as far as having a significant level of work-based learning. I do want to point out to everyone, with what we're doing here, especially with these interest surveys that you're going to be responding to, is we're going to take your interest survey and we're going to roll those up. We're going to aggregate that, and that's going to give us a strong basis for what we're going to submit to DOL. It's a competitive process, and our application will be strengthened by your program design and your numbers, what you're proposing to do. So we do know that DOL is going to be looking for a strong application in terms of work-based learning. So again, give that serious thought as far as having a significant, more than 35%, if it's 40, 50% in work-based learning. Because again, that's what DOL is going to be looking for, and it'll strengthen the state application. Admin costs is 5%. You can request 5% of your overall expenditures for admin costs. And with this project, you can have staff costs, but they just must be reasonable and necessary, justifiable, that type of thing. As you'll remember with the DWT, we were very tightly limited on what we could do with staff costs. It was 7%. It had to be training related. So this is one difference, that you do have the ability to build in some staff costs. And then with this one, you have the ability to include partnership costs. And we can talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but that's another difference. Looking at the high demand industry sectors, with the DWT, we focused on IT, healthcare, and TDL with the ability to expand in some other industries. With this project, this is an information technology project. And it's going across sectors, if that means healthcare, whatever the industry might be, but it's IT occupations. And Bob will talk with us more about that in a minute. Of this grant, you can provide core intensive training and supportive services. As those of you who do DWT know, that one is limited to training and work-based learning. So again, I'm stressing that this is comprehensive. In this grant, you can provide all of the required services. You're not required to co-enroll in other formula grants. However, you can, strategically or with your program design, that may make sense. But you are able to provide all the services out of this grant. The other thing I wanted to point out is with this grant, you might have some situations, you might have some participants who just need a very intensive reemployment services, the job search, the job matching, career counseling, job coaching, that type of thing. So they don't necessarily have to be enrolled in training or work-based learning. Again, this really is a work-based learning grant, so we are looking for that to happen. But, DOL is pointing out that in some cases, it would be acceptable if it's in individual's best interest, the IEP supports it, that they do not have to go into training. Okay, and then this JobDriven grant does end June 30th of 2006. So it's a 2-year project, which the DWT was a 2-year project too. It's just that we're halfway through that one. So those are the main
Jill covered quite a bit of the service strategy, but let's just take a step back, and there's $150 million that's going to be available with this grant. I know that you all got the training and employment notice that described the opportunity, but these are the highlights. So it is $150 million to implement new or expanded regional and locally driven partnerships. The awards to states will range from $5,000 to $6 million. As Jill pointed out, the performance period is through June 30, 2016. Right now we're thinking that we want to, based on need from you all, go after the entire $6 million. But again, that's based on what you all have going out there and the size of the projects that we can do. Because it is an NEG, this one specifically says states are only eligible applicants. They stressed I think they stress it in the 10 and everywhere that I've read or listened on a couple of different webinars about this project, that in-demand industries and businesses must be at the table, LWIBs must be at the table, and the other was you must connect with two other federally funded programs, and that is not hard for us. Certainly when we talk a little bit later about our focus being on IT and some of the models that are out there, we do things with CTE, adult ed. Of course, we have our trade customers. I do know the one thing about trade customers is that they still have to meet all of the trade requirements through trade, in addition to being part of this population if you so choose to serve trade customers. The eligible participants align, as Jill said, with the dislocated worker training grant, which is the long-term unemployed job seekers, the UI recipients that have been profiled as likely to exhaust, and then the additional one is the foreign trade immigrant workers who qualify as dislocated workers, but they're facing barriers right now to employment in their trained field or profession. I'm not exactly sure the thinking on why they added that population, but that is a little bit, that's a difference in this grant. And then some of the strategies and the expenditures Jill really went over, but because it does target a specific industry or occupation that has a demand for new employees, we're going to be targeting the information technology sector. Job matching, job coaching, and the use of long-term unemployed navigators is definitely encouraged within this grant. OJT work, we can't stress enough the earn and learn opportunities that they want to see. Again, the service coordination, what we just talked about, and co-enrollment. And then partnership costs is also another thing that you can build into your budget, and staff costs. So now we want to kind of now that we've just kind of laid a quick foundation for you, we want to start talking about, and I'm going to turn over to Bob, the analysis that we have gotten done. Oh, I forgot about this. Sorry, guys. Suggested employer roles, and we put this in here because there is such a strong emphasis on businesses and industries. We just wanted to give some examples of some things that we would like to talk about in the narrative when we submit it to DOL: the outreach and recruitment, selection, networking and mentoring, sponsoring projects, and then, of course, the biggie, the internship and on-the-job training opportunities. And with that, and you're talking to your employers, here's some examples of some benefits. And we have this IT focus because that is where we are going to target in the narrative. So it's an expand awareness of IT career opportunities in communities, find qualified and pre-screened job applicants, and then, of course, sponsoring projects and providing internship opportunities. So these are other things as you're thinking about whether or not you can and want to participate. This is some additional information that we're going to be wanting to include in our grant. So now, with that said, Bob is going to talk about the top 10 industries and give us a little bit.
We worked with the IT Learning Exchange, which is operated by IT in the state of Illinois for the Illinois Pathways Initiative, to identify what were the fast-growing, largest number of openings in IT occupations that could be employed in IT companies, IT industries, which you see here in the top 10 industries, or they could be employed by related industries like financial services and healthcare. So we came up with a top 20 list that were the fastest growing in Illinois. A number of openings projected, and also were on the top 10 or so list of Burning Glass as they scraped postings in Illinois, and also were listed by a variety of other people. So we came up with a list of about 15 occupations, IT occupations, that were at varying levels, from very entry-level positions all the way up to more advanced positions that could be represented in pathways. We also then linked those to the most well-known and certifications, because in the NEG there's a reference to industry certifications. We mapped the certifications to the occupations, to the projections, and then we linked them to where they're employed. And so you can, we'll go over the chart in a minute on the occupations and how they lay out. But largely, as you can imagine, we have the largest number of openings across the state in every LWIA is computer support professionals. They're the ones that do computer network support or user support, application support. They're usually entry-level positions that would get some level of certifications in things like A+ or Network+, but they're largely there as entry points that then move into pathways at higher level positions, either on the software side or on the network side. So what we did was we worked with CompTIA to come up with a simplified pathway model that links these occupation certifications. Then as you see in the top 10 industries, what we did is we looked and say, well, where are most of these jobs at? And these are the industries that are the most concentrated, and largely they are special IT firms who provide services in your areas to other industries, as well as people who actually sell and support hardware, software. They're also the people that do data processing, hosting, support services. They're your telecommunications providers, a variety of other things. You see hospitals pick up their insurance. The largest concentrations we're finding of IT jobs outside of the IT industry, where their employers are in the IT industry directly, are in healthcare and financial services. Lisa, if we go to the next one. And so what we did is what I think, Lisa, if I'm not mistaken, we're going to be sending everybody out there the breakdown by local area, right, for all these jobs?
Yes. We have a link on Illinois WorkNet where we're going to place all this documentation, the webinar, slideshow, and recording, and then their occupational data by LWIA.
And so what you'll see if you look really closely, we just try to summarize. These are the IT occupations and total openings by local area. So what you see is almost like, unlike certain other industries and more like healthcare, you do see presence across the state. Now, of course, in different levels from a size standpoint, but you do see presence across the state. And when you all get the information for your LWIA, you can see the bulk of the jobs. But let me explain, like the bulk of the jobs in most of the areas, the number one openings is in largely that entry-level support jobs. So that's the largest single concentration, except up in the Chicagoland area where you have a much more diverse, but especially in downstate, the most highly concentrated openings are in these entry-level positions. If I can go to the next one, Lisa. So as Jill mentioned, we worked with, we wanted to lay out kind of a general template. These are just as a kind of model to allow you to think about different program models that you'd want to come up with. and is also with the eye toward if you wanted to work with other funding streams, like adult education or career and technical education, what would be the opportunities for you to put some sort of a model together. Also with the understanding is, with strong work-based learning emphasis, you're going to need to get somebody into work as soon as possible, get them in some sort of a paid employment, and then you may want to continue to work with them on the next, like in more of a pathway model. So we kind of laid it out to give you kind of an idea of how it could work. So if you look at the bottom, and if you see those little kind of a color with orange, those are certifications in the kind of the orange boxes or the gold boxes there. Those are certifications, but we'll send you a more complete list of certifications. These are just abbreviations. So if you'll see in the model, if you did want to explore connecting to, for example, adult education, there's bridge program models out there that use Strata, which is a certification, which is nothing but an IT terminology certification, that you could embed in that as a very short-term bridge. Then if you look on the two entry-level positions, computer network support and customer web application support, just two sides of the same coin. They're the entry-level positions, again, with the largest concentration in almost all of your local areas. That they usually require on the hardware side, like an A+, not require, but it's a certification that's well known, is the A+ and Network Plus, with probably many of you training providers that do that now. But on the other side, which is more on the software side, people usually start off in help desk, application support jobs, QA roles, and again, it's really tied to the nature of the application support. We're going to be adding a healthcare certification into the box on that customer web application support that really deals with healthcare applications. It's a certification for healthcare applications. But then as you move to the right, these are more higher level positions that you may or may not want, depending on the demand in your local area or the employers you would bring on. To either go directly to those or go to a pathway model. We wanted to show you how this laid out. So what you'll get in your individual LWIA information packets are these jobs listed according to this, the jobs listed and the certifications that go with those jobs. So I don't, again, we're just trying to lay out some ideas that need to be for you to consider as you put together the plan and the survey that Jill talked about.
Okay, we want to open it up now for questions. I'm going to skip this slide real quick to show you that this is the link where we'll be placing the materials that Bob has referenced and this webinar recording so that you can go out there and access at any time. We're also going to use it just as an information exchange, so any documents that you guys will need will be found there. So we want to open it up for questions. One of the things that we would like to do, you got an interest survey, sort of like a mini application, if you will.
The floor mode is on. To request the floor, enter star, then pound.
Do I need to do that, Jeannie? Okay. So if you guys could fill that out and get that back to us on Monday, the 19th, that would be fantastic. Those will go to Mark because he's going to compile those for us. And then any other questions or anything you can direct to me. So now I'd like to open the floor for questions to Bob, or John Barr is also available, so he can answer fiscal-related, expenditure-related questions, and then Jill is also available for questions. So. Is there a number or percentage at which participation in this grant would not seem very practical? Is the first question. Bob, John, or Jill, can you respond?
Are you talking about participants, or are you talking about openings in the local area? I think if you're talking about participants, Jill, I know that in previous NEG grants, I mean, we've had, on from what, 100 down to what, 10 or 20. So I mean, it's just a matter of what's feasible and what your budget looks like.
And it is openings that they're at.
Pardon? Oh.
It is openings that they're referring to. The question's referring to.
Well, let me add, just to make the point, with this initiative, we would love to have all the LWIAs participate. That would be great. At this point, this is kind of a pre-application type of thing, so we're hoping to, out your interest now, and then we would follow up at the end of June when we got word of a grant award. We would follow up then and provide you with a formal application. But to answer the question, what I would expect is that, currently with the DWT, I think maybe our smallest grant is about $20,000. So you can have a small grant. It could be $20,000 or it could be, a couple million. But there isn't any particular cutoff. But it is a matter of, providing the services and thinking that if you need to go down as low as $20,000, $30,000, that could be okay. But again, the hope is that with the IT initiative, that we do have the situation where we would be able to build a $6 million application. There is a lot of need out there. But you're right, in the local area, you have to determine what your demand is, the employer demand, and what you're able to do.
Yeah.
Okay, we had a question that I skipped over, but Pat Farah is asking where the numbers in the slide on page 10 came from, because she thought they seemed high for her LWIA.
And that's a great question. They came from, we just decided to go with the most generalized source was the IDS Projections. Occupational projections, we pulled those off. So we'll be sending, I don't know, Lisa, we also had a question when they will come down, the LWIA information. That's pretty much right away, right?
Right, yeah. It should be by the end of day tomorrow.
Yeah, and so what you'll have there, we're also going to be sending down the highest, the industries with the highest concentration, but also employer lists. But again, you all need to look at those numbers like you do any numbers and think about how it really matches up with your understanding of your own local economy. We just wanted to give you some general guidelines of what we mean by targeted occupations, and I would urge you all to look largely at the lower level occupations, which are basically entry-level points that you could do work-based learning with pretty easily. And so I would urge you to look at those numbers as opposed to the numbers that include some higher level occupations, which may not be the bulk of your participants. So I would, again, when you look at the occupational list, they're from the IDS Projections. If you see a mistake, please let us know. We just pulled them off that, and you'll be getting your list for the occupations for your local area.
Okay, yeah, and Laura thinks we'll get those out tomorrow for sure, so hopefully around by noon. LaDonna was asking if the grant has a certain percentage of participants that must be long-term unemployed. The eligible participants for the long-term unemployed job seekers have to be at least 27 weeks in the aggregate. So since the recession that started back in December of 2007.
So Jill, I mean, as far as our current DWT, I think they had similar language in the notice. And how did we come down on that? Did we say, like, we said the state determined what the emphasis was, isn't that right?
Yeah, with the DWT grant, the way that read is that there was a target group, and it was the long-term unemployed and the UI profiled.
Right.
So they weren't giving us any specific guidance or percentage, and so we came down on the 60%, 60% had to be in that target group.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I think we've indicated, and so let me move on to this one then, with the job-driven one. Again, they haven't given us a particular percentage,
Right.
but what they're saying differently on this one is that this is an emphasis, not a target group, but an emphasis on dislocated workers who are long-term unemployed, UI profilees, or the foreign-trained immigrant workers. They're not using the word target group. I've got a question, and just for clarification on that, but with the thinking on this is, as NELWIA moves forward on this, we do have to make that effort to reach out to those groups, because DOL, that's what they're going to be looking at as far as the effort to communicate and to work lists from IDES, the UI profiling list, that type of thing. So at this point, we could comfortably say that, like with DWT, it would be 60% or more in the target group. But do we have more flexibility than that? Possibly.
Yeah, I would say that to the letter of it, and I know that that's probably a policy decision that we would have to make, but I would think to be in the spirit of this, as long as it's 51%, but if we set our target at 60, that would be consistent with the DWT.
Yeah. And throughout all of these documents, you will see that DOL keeps stressing long-term unemployed. That's what the initiative is. So I know that they are expecting to see us making every effort to reach that group as well as the other two target groups.
Okay.
Jill, were you trying to pull up the survey form? I see it at the bottom of the screen. Were you wanting to show that?
I would like to show it so when I go through it, we have it in front of us.
Okay.
I wasn't trying to pull it up, though. I don't think I was doing it.
Jeannie's getting it up.
Another question, and sorry, I misread that question. I somehow skipped right over that percentage word. I know we're targeting IT in this grant, but will we be able to be very creative in getting the occupation covered under IT since we are in such a rural area? This is from Mid-5. A person may be doing a lot of IT in their job, but the specific they are being hired for is not necessarily a specific IT job. Bob, do you want to?
Yes, I think we'd love to hear from you all what you're thinking about. One reason why we put the health IT certification is it's a combined certification for healthcare and IT, and it's mostly was originally the implementation of electronic medical records, and it's also in the move toward coordinated community-based care. It's becoming a dominant thing in healthcare. But again, if you are finding IT-related or IT-intensive jobs in your local economy, please, when you do the survey, add some stuff in there what you're thinking about.
Yeah, that's a good point. That'll be helpful. So IT-intensive jobs, that's good.
Yep.
Okay. Pam has another question. Is it possible that our local data will show different industries than those on page 9 of the PowerPoint?
Yes, and we'd be happy to work with any LWIA that is that interested in pursuing this. We're going to be working directly with the Learning Exchange people from now until the submittal to work with any local area who wants to do this, to actually identify employers, identify industry concentrations, identify the right certification mixes. Anything that you all would have questions about between now and the submittal time, DCO and the Learning Exchange people are ready to work with you all.
And you're the ones in the local area. You're the ones who have been meeting with employers and economic development groups and business industry groups. So you have an idea yourself locally or even regionally what it is that the need is and what's out there. So we want you to rely on that too, because the bottom line, when it's time to operate the project, regardless of what an LMI report might show, if you're aware of employers who have that need, we want you to be reaching out to them, making that connection, developing that partnership. So we do have OJTs, we've got customized training, we've got work experience or internships.
Yeah,
so
and
definitely
also,
your local
some people we're
partnership.
talking to, there's a bunch of IT service providers, which is that #1 industry that's listed on that. It's probably the #1 employer across all your LWIAs, but they're largely service providers that may provide staff for services for other industries. So I would urge you all to kind of look at the employer list you get. If you have some other ideas on what to look for, we'd be more than happy to work with you. We just wanted to kind of start the process of thinking through this.
Another question, I got a question via my email. Amy Santa Catarina wasn't able to access the website, but she is listening in, and she wants to know if we have a target on, hold on a minute. What are we targeting for cost per customer served? Do we have a target for that? John? Jill?
Well, I was going to say, as far as a target cost, what DOL expects when we do these NEG grants is to start with what your current cost per participant, your current cost per training, those types of things. Look at your current costs, but then there can be some justification made on why it is that you're going to be exceeding it. For example, if you have very heavy OJT costs. So I would just suggest you start by taking a look at your current cost PERS and then develop your program design and then see where that falls. But again, with justification, I think there's, because of the kinds of services we're providing, there is reason, justification to explain why it's higher. But it shouldn't be double or triple, so that's a good place to start.
Right, and I think that as you look at it, you have to be consistent with the application of your local policies as it relates to the supportive services and to the OJTs and then other customized training that you provide. So, and I also, point out that, as far as participants, they do also need to meet the dislocated worker eligibility criteria, as well as, again, that the emphasis on the long term. But I mean, I think at a minimum, that dislocated worker eligibility criteria, along with all the documentation that goes with that. As far as additional opportunities with this grant, I think if you read through the notice, there are some opportunities for innovation, and I think that that's where we as a state can be competitive in our application to show that, well, these are some things that we want to wrap around what we regularly do. So we're showing that this is something above and beyond, right? So it's part of how we're going to really accelerate the job placement process. And I think that if you look at it as a commentary, if you look at some of the language that they use in that notice, it mirrors a lot of what we talk about in our ATOM project. And so I think that's a credit to everybody who's participating in that the national level, they're noticing the successes. And if we know that there's a lot of logistics involved, and there's a lot of lessons that we're learning, and I think we're applying those lessons to the IT sector without the constraints of a formal evaluation. So I think that's one of the reasons that we're all jumping on this opportunity.
Okay, I think that answers Susan's question about applicants having to be unemployed at the time they apply for the program. They do have to meet the dislocated worker eligibility. If there aren't any other questions, but it looks like there might be one more coming in, I want to turn it over to Jill so she can walk through the interest survey. And then once she does that, we can have a few more questions before we wrap things up. We don't want to take too much of your time, but we appreciate you participating. So Jill, do you want to walk through the survey?
Yes. Okay, with the survey, again, this is kind of a pre-application type of thing, and we would be doing a full application in July or August. So at this point, we're asking basically just for some basic information. Be sure, I just wanted to point out, be sure that by Monday, that this does get your application does get to Mark. And then we are going to combine these and see where we stand as far as your interest and the funding requested. What I do want to point out is that as you're looking at developing this and thinking through your project, I do want to keep throwing out some of this that you've heard about, DOL's emphasis, and that's on, John just mentioned acceleration. It's an emphasis on work-based learning. It's an emphasis on serving the target group as far as the long-term unemployed and the UI profiled and the immigrant group. So as you're developing this, keep those types of things in mind. What I want to point out as far as the top part, the participant section, with what you're doing there, the way Mark has this designed, and thank you, Mark, for developing this, as you're entering numbers, you might get a message off to the side in red. So read that carefully because it's kind of some edits. For example, if you're putting in a number that can't be correct because it's got to be less than something or it's got to be greater than something else you've already entered, you're going to be seeing a red notation off to the side. So watch for that. If you do run into any problems, feel free to call on this forum. Feel free to call Mark, and he can help you with that, or you can also call me. I might be able to help you. Okay, so as far as the total participants, basically everybody, moving on to core and intensive services, everybody should be getting core and intensive service. I mean, they're going to be developing an IEP. You're going to be providing some basic services before they go into training. And in some cases, like we said, not many, but in some cases that may be all they receive. They do get their intensive services and then they get placed in a job. The total training, that line recognizes, and this is set up because it matches up to how DOL requires us to submit our application. So DOL has the category of total training, and then under that, they have how many people are going into occupational, the classroom training, and then they want to know how many people are going into work-based learning. Now, it could very well be that people are doing both, and DOL would love to see that. So it's not a formula. Total training isn't a matter of adding up those two components. It could be that people are getting classroom training and they're also getting work-based learning. They may get an OJT or a paid work experience. Again, we're encouraging you to do a lot of that, the work-based learning piece. Looking at work-based learning, we do have the separate lines here, looking at OJT, customized training, the apprenticeships, and then the paid work experience or internships. One thing I want to point out, just because there's confusion sometimes, customized training, that is the training where the employer, there's employer buy-in, that they're paying, 50% of the training costs, and there's a commitment on their part to hire the successful completers of that training. Sometimes we use the term class size training, and I think people just kind of get those confused. So I want to point out that customized training, with it being work-based learning, that is where we do have employer buy-in. And there's a willingness then to hire the successful completers at the end. With these four categories, again, these don't necessarily add up to the item above. You have to enter that, the training work-based learning total, because it could be that you have a model where you might have some of your participants who are getting, for example, maybe they're going to get a paid work experience and then they're going to get an OJT. So you've got one person getting two of those services. So again, we're asking you to complete this and also complete the work-based learning, that there is not a formula there to total that. Keep in mind, too, that this is your best thinking right now. This isn't, you're not being held to this. Come next, July, August, we're going to be doing another application. But this is, how we're going to build our application. So give it some thought, but knowing that you aren't going to be held to this. And I mention that because, you're wondering, am I going to be doing an OJT? Is it going to be work experience? I don't know. It depends on the person coming in, what their need is. It depends on the employers, their willingness. Put something down to indicate, what your thinking is, and then, of course, it can be adjusted when it's time to operate the program. And you can tell I'm very positive that we'll be awarded this grant, because I'm sure it'll be a wonderful application, a strong application. Okay. The footnote there, is that you are encouraged to provide classroom training and work-based learning. And a reminder that the classroom training should result in an industry-recognized credential. Moving on to the budget part of this. The core and intensive services, that's where you do have a lot of, and this is something that, DOL keeps emphasizing, some of these innovative services. If you're doing job matching or job coaching, those kinds of things, you're going to have some staff costs related to those intensive services. So the bottom line is being successful in placing these individuals in employment, getting them to that job. And so if you've got a program design where you're doing some of those intensive services, then be sure to show that and build in the funds for it. Again, DOL is looking for innovation, so we can do that at the local level, and it'll be described then in the state application. As far as the training, then, moving on to the training, that does total then the two components below that. It's going to be occupational classroom training and work-based learning. The work-based learning, DOL does want us to report to them separately, so there's a line for OJT, how much of the work-based learning is OJT, and then how much of it is all the other, the customized training, the apprenticeships, the paid work experience, and internships. Supportive services, that is available under this grant. Again, local policies would dictate what that's going to look like. And then the last category is the program management and oversight, and DOL has this broken down into administration, so you have a 5% maximum on administration. And then there's another activity that they're allowing us to do with these funds is partnership development. And basically that's, activities at your level to help build, strengthen your partnerships. And again, you can be innovative with that. If there's something in particular you have a need for, but it's a matter of partnership development, strategic planning, that type of thing. If you're convening groups of employers, you're having meetings, whatever it might be, but you are able to put some funds in that particular line. The next part of the form just basically lays out some of these budget requirements. So it'll be a flag to you if anything is off. In other words, you have to have at least 35% work-based learning. So if you're less than that, it'll flag it, and you'll need to revise your budget. And the admin and partnership development are there also. The cost PERS is automatically calculated also, and that's just to show you, so visually you can see what your cost PERS are looking like, and you can then just kind of evaluate it based on your local area and what you're used to. Do I have something that's off here? Do I need to make some adjustments? The next part of the survey, basically it's the narrative, and I wanted to point out that at the top of it, this would be on the second page, at the top of it, it does indicate that if additional space is needed, so you can adequately respond to one of these items, you can go to the last page and then just use that box as an open box to follow up on anything where you didn't have enough room. The other thing I wanted to point out is, and there's a note there that when you're in the box, just a reminder, if you need to stay in the box but start a new line, a new paragraph, return, then do hit the Alt and return key. And that will take you then, staying within the same box, but getting you a new line. Okay, so the first box there, that's optional because it just gives you an opportunity. If you want to make any comments, provide explanation, dealing with the participant numbers, that top section of the previous page, then there's an opportunity there for you to just provide anything that you want us to know about as we're reviewing that. Same thing with the next box, but it deals with the budget section. If there's any budget numbers you want to explain, provide clarification, then put some notes there in that text box. Moving on to the rest of this, the occupations, we're just looking as you're thinking through this and developing your plan, your strategy, is to provide information about the occupations for your particular area. What is it that you're thinking of doing? Identify the IT occupations that you would be targeting. Again, flexibility, this, will be finalized in August. So this is your current thinking, and, that could change and things will evolve. The next section is courses and certifications. So again, based on what your thinking is, what your demand is, what you're seeing for the LMI data, or your experience, your partnerships with those in your area, list the IT classes, the courses, and then the associated credentials that you think you would be utilizing. The next section deals with employers. Go ahead and identify 10 to 15 employers that you think you'll be working with, as far as on this project specifically with some of these work-based learning opportunities, or with employment placements. This is something we will include with our application to DOL, is getting that specific and listing some of these employers. DOL is going to want to see what that looks like, that we do have some relationships, we've got employers. So that's what that section is. Partnership development, again, it's going back to the fact that DOL is allowing us to have some funds for that. So what we're asking there, what is your thinking on that? If you've got something on the partnership development line, how would you use those funds? What is your thinking? Participant recruitment. DOL, again, knowing that they've got the emphasis on the long-term, the unemployed, the immigrant workers, they were wanting to find out who you plan to partner with to be successful with this project. We do, if you look at the 10, and I think we have posted it or we will be posting it along with the Q&A document that DOL has provided. With that, they do have a requirement, and I think Lisa went over that already, that you do have to, which is no problem, but they specifically state that we need to partner with at least 2 federal, state, or local programs, and unemployment insurance, of course, is the obvious one. But in this section where we talk about recruitment, do make a point of listing who you would be partnering with to help with your recruitment, to identify the target group. And then the innovation is just what's your thinking on anything you want to do. And maybe, that title innovation, you may not think something is particularly innovative, that it's something you do all the time. But at the same time, if it's something, the bottom line is if it's something that helps us with the success of these participants, getting them quickly into employment that they can sustain, that they can grow in, develop in, move on in, feel free to put any comments there. Again, these are some things that we may be able to insert and include in the narrative that we submit to Department of Labor. So we're just trying to pick your brain, some innovation, some ideas that we would be using in this project. The last section is that we're going to be developing an email distribution list. So as information is going out about the project, or we have requests for information, or we have whatever it might be, we do want to build that email distribution list based on who it is that you tell us you want on that list. So be sure to provide the name and the email address of anybody that you want to be getting these JobDriven NEG emails. So at that point, we've gone through the entire document. Let me just open it up for questions real quick. We've got a little bit of time left.
Jill and everyone out there, this is Mark. Hopefully not all 23 LWIs will need to respond to this, but if you get in those fields and find that you don't have enough space to type everything you want, just because we want to try to compile everything together and not end up getting it in a bunch of different emails, we want it on these forms, go ahead and send me what you have completed at that time, and I can expand those fields. Unfortunately, once we lock down a field, we can't have you or us expand the height of a row without me actually unlocking it and doing that. So I'm okay with if you get to a point you've got some information and you're exceeding the limits of the cell, to send it to me. Let me know if you need like double the size of a certain field or more, and then I'll send them back to you. That way you don't have to start over again. And then you'll see all those. I couldn't hear Jill real well on the notes that indicate you maybe have exceeded a limit. Those will be on the right side of the form, so when you're viewing it, make sure you don't expand it all the way to where all you're seeing are the columns that you fill in, because you may miss those items. They're just off to the right, so you shouldn't miss them, but leave a few of those cells on the right exposed so that you can get caught up on that. That way someone doesn't have to make some additions and subtractions and that themselves and miss that maybe they've overlooked that they've missed one of those marks that we're highlighting there.
One thing I wanted to mention too is you're thinking through this and kind of developing your program design and how you would do this. There is flexibility with this project, and we talked a little bit about the career pathway model, and we've got, as a part of the PowerPoint, we've got that laid out. So that's definitely something we can use, and I know some of you are using that type of the pathway model for Adam, but don't let that intimidate you, because you do have the flexibility if you're not following a strict pathway like that. There is flexibility in how this project is operated at the local level. We'll have resources from the Learning Exchange that Bob mentioned. We're going to be working with them throughout the project, and so there'll be plenty of resources for you. But I just wanted to point out, there is flexibility with this project. There's just some limitations, DOL requirements that we've talked about that we do have to stick with. And again, I just suggest you take a look at the training and employment notice if you haven't, because that would just reemphasize some of the things that we've talked about and that DOL is, is emphasizing and are most concerned with.
Are there any other questions or comments that anybody'd like to share? Well, if not, then I think we've been on an hour, so we will close out the